Is there a living spiritual master that actually made it to enlightenment? Well, it's not me, and it's not East Forest, the guest of this podcast, but it very well might be Ram Dass, someone who he had the pleasure of sitting down with and recording his new album called Ram Dass, available on Spotify and everywhere music can be found. East Forest is an incredibly interesting dude. We dive into a discussion on psychedelics. He put out a 5-hour psychedelic psilocybin playlist on Spotify. He's a gangster. I had an amazing conversation with him, and I know you guys are going to love it.
Is there tobacco in there or not? Just straight herbs?
Calming blend.
Did you make a ring out of the bowl? Is that something you can do intentionally?
That definitely had a bowl.
You made like a ring that came out of the bowl.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was confused.
That was fucking miraculous. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
East Forest, my man, welcome.
Thank you. Welcome to myself. Thank you.
Good to have you here, man.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
So interestingly, how this connection was made is I started listening to your Ram Dass tracks, and I've been kind of on my own Ram Dass kick pretty recently, actually. I mean, I guess
you said it was Be Here Now? Or
no.
something? What was your gateway Ram Dass drug?
What was the gateway? I had my partner Whitney talking about it, and she was reading Polishing the Mirror, and I would look over her shoulder. She'd tell me some quotes, but I had other people. I had Duncan Trussell, I had Tate Fletcher, I had other people like dripping little bits, and then the thing that finally like tipped me over the edge was a combination of your music and then the documentary that Raghu is putting out, Becoming Nobody.
Yes.
So the combination of both of those, after both of those, I was like, I'm fucking in. Mm-hmm. Because there was just like, and I think I expressed this to you when we first talked, like you can tell when an instrument's in tune, even if you don't play. Like, from the most part, if a violin is like cracked or if like it's fucked up.
Your body knows.
Your body, like you feel it. It's like weird.
Side note about that, cool thing about music is you can have a PhD in musicology and all this stuff, or know nothing, and your response to the music, totally the same.
Yeah.
Like it's built into your system.
That's
just
a
like
weird
you're
thing.
saying, like,
Yeah.
And that's a whole rabbit hole of like
I'd like to go down
a fifth
that.
is a fifth and all this stuff about tunings, but that's because we know these things. It's part of our nervous system to understand music.
Yeah. And
Anyway.
I think it's part of our nervous system to understand truth. And it's something that we can convince ourselves otherwise because the mind gets in the way. But hearing Ram Dass actually speak, like reading the book was cool. I was like, yep, that sounds right. Yep, that sounds right. And hearing like Whitney, like read this thing. And it's just text. I was like, yeah, for sure. He's talking about some like interesting, correct shit. And I'm totally on board with what he's saying. But then you hear him speak even the most subtle thing. Even in that very first track that you put out, which I think is a fucking brilliant track because there's like, and I believe this is what it is, and I could be wrong, but it sounds like the subtle sounds of his wheelchair creaking, like right when you open up the nature track.
You know what that is? That's my piano bench in my house. But those incidental sounds, I really like them.
I really like them.
Because that's part of life and that's part of the creation.
No doubt.
And with digital music and Pro Tools, you're just always taking everything out.
Yeah.
And they think that's the perfection. The perfection to me is the reality of it. All the instruments on that record, aside from the programmed drums, are acoustic instruments. And that's important to me too, because like Ram Dass is talking about stuff that's so real and salient and physical, but also ethereal at the same time. And I just wanted to have this world of like organicness.
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. I mean, the start of that track, he's just talking about trees, stars.
Do you want to know how that happened?
And I don't know how it happened, but it's fucking amazing because when he says it, it actually sounds like instead of saying just trees, like normal, he's like really talking about the name of the tree. It's like there's a book called The Name of the Wind, and it's like where there's these wizards who can actually name something with what it is, and it's like he's naming the tree as what it really is.
But dude, let me give you the picture. Here's what happened. That was the first thing I asked him. So I went all the way over to Maui last summer, and I'm sitting there with Ram Dass, and they shut the door, and it's all of a sudden just the two of us. And there, as you can imagine, there are many hoops to get through to that moment. And every hoop, you're thinking, this is going to fall apart. This isn't going to work. I'm going to be found out. Whatever the thought is. And I realized this, I was like, oh my God, this is like the spiritual White House or something.
Yeah.
This is not you don't just waltz in here and get private time. He's usually surrounded by a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I was really nervous. And he just looked at me. And I thought we'd just have this casual conversation, and I'd take little clips and put music to it. And it was just eye gazing going on. Just soul to soul. And I'm totally exploding in the inside of my heart. It's like, oh my God. And I see this picture of Maharaji behind him that's laughing. And I have this massive moment of like, oh my God, all this stuff. And then I realized that it's like, I need to ask him questions. Like, and I said,
because that would just continue potentially.
Yeah, and that would be it. It would be cool for me, but there's no record.
No,
And so I first question I asked him was about like, hey, we're sitting in his study, and these windows here are looking out at the north shore of the ocean, and the windows are open, and you hear the birds, and the breeze is coming through, and it's hot in the room, and he's got all of his stuff around him. And I asked him something about like nature as, how can we use nature as a way to connect to ourselves? And we're so disconnected through all the technology and social media and all this stuff. And particularly for younger people, like, what do you have to say to them? What do we do? Blah, this kind of thing. And he just stares at the ocean, and he's got his beads. He's doing his ROMs, and he's not saying anything. And I'm just waiting, because I said, I know I need to wait. Don't push him, because he had the aphasia, and I need to just let him speak. And after a while, what you hear on that song is exactly what he had. He just says, trees, water. And each one of them, there might have been 60 seconds between the words. I don't know where he's going. I'm like, is he, what? My brain's doing all this stuff. Like, is this working? Did he hear me? He's just saying things. But then after like 10 minutes where he goes through the list, it was 10 minutes in the real time. All are our friends, are us. We are nature. When you hug a tree, you're hugging yourself. And he goes on this whole thing, and I'm just like, oh my God, this guy is like fully there. Yeah. Total master of 50 years of speaking and all the spiritual work. And he's sort of locked behind this aphasia. And when we recorded the words and you put it to music, the pauses now don't matter. They become an asset in the songs because your brain doesn't hear them. It's in the music. And now I can fit the phrases into the rhythm of the music. And so all of a sudden, it's like this wonderful medium for him. But I didn't know that going in. And so that song that you're resonating with was the very first thing he said. You can just imagine him gazing at all that nature. And he's saying what he sees. Yeah. Yeah, it was special.
That, I think, you could look at it as if that, the stroke that he suffered, aphasia, I guess is the technical term.
Was the result. Yes, it's hard for him to put his thoughts to words. Yeah.
You could look at that as something that hindered his ability to communicate, because you look at the old documentary and he had kind of a funny sense of humor. He was very charismatic, and he could really lead an audience through a speech like that.
He was funny.
He was really funny.
Yeah.
He was really funny.
Yeah.
And that had its own value, and I think was probably a very special experience for people. But having the limitation that he has now, it just feels like every word he speaks is so much more powerful. It almost like you could look at it like holding him back, but really it's almost potentially giving him this kind of funneling device where he's actually putting the entirety of his soul into every one of those words he says.
Yeah, man. And it really goes to that adage of less is more.
Yeah.
When he really
I say so many fucking words to say one thing, and he says water. Because I'm like, oh God.
He's forced to really think through, how do I get through? He has all these thoughts probably going on. His brain's working just fine. And he has to be and that's what blew my mind, is not only is he good at this, but it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And to track what he says from start to finish, he's doing that. And when I'm sitting there, I had a hard time tracking it. I mean, he told the story. There's a song in the record called A Miracle about meeting Maharaji. Beautiful story. It's a 6 and some change minute song. It took an hour and a half to say.
Wow.
Hour and a half.
Wow.
And he tracked it all the way to the end.
Wow.
I mean, so
such presence, right?
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
able to just track that and stick with it, and you would never know listening to the song. It sounds like it came out at the cadence. I mean, I think it's part of your mastery. Like it's when you listen to the song, it sounds like the perfect cadence.
Yeah.
Even like the "I Am Loving Awareness," song, which is incredible, which is definitely one of my favorites as well.
Yeah.
Like the way, the pacing by which he says that. I mean, how long was that song? That was probably quite a while.
And that one's a journey too, because I knew that I Am Loving Awareness meditation of his, and I was hoping he'd get to it at some point, and he did naturally.
Yeah.
And that one was really cool because he's going into that space and not just talking about what that space is, but the song itself is sort of taking you there too. So it becomes a tool in a way. And I love music like that when it's a tool. It is just cool to listen to, but if you just listen to the words and kind of follow what he's saying, and he's saying like, I use this phrase as a mantra to get out of my mind, and here's how I do it, and then he does it, and you're just kind of listening or saying it, you'll go there.
Yeah.
You experience yourself as loving awareness, which is a feeling. But he's just someone who I honor him for saying yes to the project when he has recorded 50,000 hours of himself talking, wonderful talks from decades. So the obvious choice would be, no, you don't need to come here and record more. Just go have at it. Here's the archive. But he's like, yeah, let's do it. Yes.
And it's fucking perfect, man. And I don't know. I mean, everybody, I'm going to have all the links for all this. You can check it out on Spotify. You can buy it on vinyl. It just came out today, actually.
The vinyl finally arrived. But yeah, the album's out everywhere.
However you want to consume this. I mean, I think the message and really the reason why he said yes and the reason why you said yes is to get this out to as many human beings as possible, because it is transformative music. And it's something that the more you listen to it, the more you resonate with that truth, and that resonates with that part of you that feels that truth inside yourself.
Look, there's a lot of shit going on these days, as we all know, and I feel like we're facing a transition on the planet and the entire civilization like nothing we've ever faced ever. We could take any of the calamities that's going on, whether you want to take your pick, peak oil, peak soil, peak water, goes on and on and on. Each one of them is much worse than you think it is. Yet we continue as we have to, and there's a strange sort of playing the music on the ship of the Titanic situation going on. We need all the help we can get, and I'm a believer that the kind of change we need comes from the inside out. Where else does it come from? It's not some top-down solution. It's certainly not going to come from our top-down right now in our government. And there's no alien that's going to come to save us, and there's no technology in my mind.
Most likely not an alien that's going to save us. There's a possibility.
There is a possibility, Aubrey. You're right.
The other things are pretty definite, but they got to give a possibility where a possibility is there.
Well, I think it's a safer bet to rely on that which has worked before and the wisdom around us, and that's not something we do.
Too.
And Ram Dass, he's 88.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the reasons I wanted to talk to him now is to give him the opportunity to speak to our times today. And that's a way of honoring elders and wisdom. The guy's got some serious fucking wisdom and knows a lot in a way how to distill that in a way. I don't know about you, but I connect with Ram Dass because I grew up sort of in an atheist household. And I was sort of adrift, like typical American kid. I'm like, I don't know. I try a little of this, a little of that. You try a little Buddhism in college, maybe a little Christianity here and there, whatever. You're just looking for that meaning, but we have no rite of passage.
Yeah,
right?
Until you try mushrooms.
And that's exactly what happened to me.
That's exactly what happened to me.
And Ram Dass was someone who was sort of a secular spiritualist and also an intellectual coming from Harvard, and had this, and also very charismatic and funny. And they had this combination that was just very approachable and so heart-opening, but it wasn't anything I had to buy into or give money to or really even read a bunch of books to have to grok on a physical gut level.
Yeah.
And I wanted him to speak to today because I think it's actually quite important.
Yeah.
And so that was really the entire thinking behind making the record. It's like, what does this guy have to say about what we're going through?
Yeah, and it's when I look out at the world, I see all of these things and all of these downstream effects, but really the upstream cause is a crisis of consciousness. It's us not being aware of who we really are, which in Ram Dass's language is the soul. We're identified as the ego, the name, the identity that we have, and all of the thoughts and all of the fragility that comes from all those things, not recognizing that we are the soul, which is a manifestation of God. And as he says in that very first track, and what's that? Love all the way. Like, fuck, man, you fucking get that. And it's just like, it's just heartbreaking. Everybody in all of this conflict and all of this, and really, we're all just the same, man. We're just love all the way. And if we got that, and if we figured this out, and that we're not separate from the earth, and that we're part of all of these different things, our ego tries to create separateness, but if we surrendered to that unicity of our soul and the connection between all beings, like, we would fucking fix all these problems.
It's simple, but it's not easy.
No, true.
And I sympathize with everyone, because I feel the same thing of like the yeah, but, right? So my mind says, yeah, it is all love, but I got to go to work on Monday, or like, my girlfriend just broke up with me and I'm going through this thing, or I'm angry, or I'm sick. I'm really sick, and I don't know, I'm angry about that. I'm depressed, all these things. And the whole record was intended as one listening experience to go through these teachings. But I know when you get to the end of it, there's this thought of like, what do we do? Because we do need to be inspired. And the last song is called Love Everybody. And it's the only teaching that his teacher, the Neem Karoli Baba Maharaji, told him essentially was love everybody and tell the truth. Serve everyone. So love everybody and tell the truth. Very simple teaching. Very nuanced and tricky to put into practice. That's okay. Tell the truth. Tell the truth to myself, in my mind. What does that even mean? Tell the truth to me. What is truth? Is it my truth? Is it your truth? Sure, my mind can go down all these things, but I don't think the prescription is actually complicated. And that's something I try to embed there at the end of the record as kind of a bookend.
And I think the advantage of doing that, one of the best things that we can do is, if we're able to do that, if we're able, like Ram Dass,
you're able to do that.
If you're able to do that, you're able to do that, and you're able to give people permission to do the same. Like Ram Dass, even though I haven't had the privilege to meet him like you do, when he says, I love my pain, I love my wheelchair, and I know that instrument is tuned to truth, and I know that he's telling the absolute radical fucking truth of that thing.
Yeah.
I know that whatever I'm afraid of, maybe I'm afraid of cancer because people in my family died of cancer. Like, I know that there's a place that I can get to where I can say, I love my cancer. I love my whatever the thing is that's challenging it. Like, that is possible. It's possible because I've seen someone do it before, and we need that fucking social proof. And the more of us that do it, the more social proof there is, the more that it's possible for everybody.
No, that's it. That is about witnessing for others that which they need to see and feel. And this is a really, really important point. We're just talking about Charles Eisenstein. This is something that he talked about a long time ago. I went to a retreat 10 years ago when I first met him because I read his first book. And I remember him putting out this idea about, you can hold for someone else a truth or what you feel they need. You can embody it, even if you don't think, you might be, well, I'm not that, or I'm not Buddha. All these things. It's like no. You can be that witness and embody that thing and reflect it right back to them. You have that full capability to do that, and it actually is like the golden rule. Like, by doing that, by making someone else feel, say, secure or infinite or loved, you're going to feel loved. Infinite. You're engendering it in them, but you're also doing it yourself. And I think a lot of people feel that they see this in others, but there's something there's like the distancing or a separation between themselves.
Yeah, like this mythology of how much work they need to do to get to that state, or how they have to earn it, or how they don't deserve it, or all of these stories that we tell ourselves that prevent us from the very first step into doing that, which is that unconditional love moment, which can happen at any point.
Your next breath.
Your next fucking breath.
I'm just saying, it's there. It's not something I give you. It's already in all of us. And it's just about peeling away an onion. And it's not even something that you need to go, it's in your next breath. And then you know what? You'll fall out of it, and then you'll fall back into it. And that is the engine, in my opinion, of our incarnation. And there's this strange feeling for humans, especially these days, of about a destination. You know, like, we're always like this kind of hierarchy of, I mean, it's symptomatic. You see it with the quantification of everything, how many followers and likes. But it's like, it also goes into this notion of like where I'm at in my spiritual life.
Spiritual materialism.
Or happiness even. Forget about spirituality. It's, you know, the old like, it's in our fucking Constitution, you know, the right to happiness. That's unique to the American ideal, this sort of manifest destiny of my consciousness and I deserve to be happy. But we always think we're going to arrive there. And it's like, I think we discount the joy that is inherent in our life from moment. We have it a lot, and it's in the small moments. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, we think it needs to have razzle dazzle and all these lights and stuff. There's a meditation teacher, Lauren Roche, that I spoke to, and he speaks a lot about this. It's like doing your dishes. You know, you can have these moments of just like, that was it, though. That was enlightenment. That is enlightenment. You are enlightened. And then you're going to fall into the thing with your thoughts and your mind, but you're going in and out of this stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And the cultivation of realizing what's already there is much easier than thinking you have to spend 20 years sweeping an ashram floor to even get the first lesson.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that makes perfect sense. And those realizations, those epiphanies that we can have when we feel it for no reason at all, you know, and it's just there, like you said, in your breath. Those are the things that can recalibrate your whole understanding. This was actually one of the gifts that the first Burning Man I went to was.
Which year was that?
So that was 4 years ago. So it just ended. So it was 4 burns ago. And I didn't go this year. But the very first one, I mean, it's this wild, mind expanding. You can't even possibly fathom how big and how ridiculous it is and how free you are to do absolutely everything you could possibly imagine. There's every drug you ever want. There's every type of music, there's every type of light, there's every type of sexuality expressed, there's every type of everything. And it's all available to you. All you have to do is hop on your fucking bike, load it up with whatever the fuck substances you want, and you're out in this wonderland of absolute radical freedom. But the very best times I had was just sitting in the dusty ass RV with my homies. And laughing.
Did you need to go to Burning Man for that?
Exactly,
for
right?
For that?
Exactly. But it was the juxtaposition of like, what was my favorite part of Burning Man 1? It was sitting in a dusty RV with just a couple of my good friends. You know?
That's beautiful.
Like, and that's the fucking beauty of like an experience like that is like, oh, that's what we have available. It's like when I talked to this, and I've told this story before on the podcast, but I talked to this Super Bowl champ quarterback. And he listened to me talk about mushrooms, and he's like, hey, man, I got to tell you, I won the fucking Super Bowl. But you know what my favorite experience in life was?
How often does he drop that?
Yeah, I don't know.
I won't have the linguine. You know, I won the Super Bowl, bro. So
it's obvious. He doesn't even say it. But he goes, you know, I won the Super Bowl, but you know what was a better day? When I was sitting on the beach taking mushrooms with my friends.
God bless.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, the fucking Super Bowl, bro?
Yeah.
Like that is a
gift.
Dreams.
That is a gift. You know, I mean, how many rich people do we need smashing their car into a wall to commit suicide? To show us what we think we know, that isn't how you really buy anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't come from that. My favorite moments.
Not even the fucking Super Bowl.
Yeah,
not even the Super Bowl.
You don't have to convince me. The Super Bowl isn't my goal, but yeah, you could say I get it. The analogy is clear. Yeah, never really was striving for the Super Bowl myself. Yeah, I get it. And when I was at Burning Man, my favorite moments actually were things like this double rainbow that happened. Or one night, I remember the moon just was blowing my mind. But all the other lights and stuff, and it was cool.
Right.
But nowadays, I would rather honestly take a backpacking trip because the feeling I'm going to get from at certain moments of really being in it and feeling that reflection in me is, to me, quite powerful. Mm-hmm. Maybe more so than Burning Man. But look, hey, different folks, different strokes. There's infinite pathways to God, and that may be one for people and may not. That's a way of being further in an illusion. I don't know.
Well, I think one of the beautiful parts of it is like we always think that if more is better. And when you go to some place where you have most, it's the most. You go to the place that's the most, and then you realize at that point there's like nothing more that you could possibly want. Do I want more half-naked beautiful girls? No, it's not possible. Do I want more loud music that I love dancing to? No, it's not possible. Do I want more spectacles of light? What the fuck more do I want? There's no more. And still, the best thing was just the human connection that was available.
That's all I'm looking for. I don't know about you, but it's like we all want to be witnessed. Yeah. It's like we were saying before, we want to be seen in a way that feels authentic as a soul, that I am not a ghost. I lived in New York City for a long time. I remember everyone on their iPods, and there's millions of people around me, but no one looks you in the eye because they're afraid to, because they're weird people, you know. So it's a protection thing. But I started to feel like a ghost.
Yeah.
And then I've been moving since then to like smaller and smaller cities, more and more nature. But there's something that I've been hungry for, which is just like that sense of community. And just like right now, you're looking me in the eye, and I feel like we're here. And what else, honestly, what else do you need when you're dying? I bet that's what people really want, is a sense of just being seen, and seeing their own reflection of like soul to soul, you know. And that's what Ram Dass was doing when we first sat down, because he knew that. He's like, we don't have to say anything. I don't know about you, but like when I meet someone who's had a powerful psychedelic experience and we want to talk about it, they want to talk about it, and we just look at each other, I can tell. It's like, there's nothing I can say. Yeah. There's nothing you can say. And we both know that. And it's me just saying like, I know, I see you. That's it. And then we can sit here and dance around it with words. But
yeah, it's the ineffable. You know, it's like all of the words. That's the problem with using the word God, or the problem with using the word soul, or the problem with the minute you start to put anything into a word, it comes with all the barnacles and baggage of every way that you've interpreted that thing. So
there's
that's
symbols.
So the truth often comes in the deepest way in those other moments, unless you're like a real wizard like Ram Dass, where when you speak it, it just has that kind of, if you actually tune in, it has the tenor of something that is really, really, really authentically there.
It's poetry. And I think that's why the arts are so powerful at speaking to these things, the mystic poetry to music. Obviously I'm biased, but why I like music is because it is dancing around in this metaphorical way around the mystery. I was talking to Eric Davis a couple weeks ago. He's kind of a modern philosopher. Yeah. And he had this wonderful phrase he said in the podcast about that the mystery has no edge. And I was like, oh, wow, what a trippy idea. I mean, that's kind of perfect. And this idea that music and dance and all creativity, in a sense, is dancing around the edge where there is no edge of the mystery, because there's nothing else we can do. And so that's almost one of the things that makes us unique about humans, is this ability to be creative and to create. And why wouldn't it be? What would we do but to sing about the mystery, in a sense? It's as if like this operating system we're in, our consciousness, like this is the thing we've incarnated into. And it's this binary dualistic thing, which is kind of cool that then the computers come up and that's binary and so forth. Yeah. But that's the world we're meant to be in. And we can't kind of go past that octave of consciousness without dying. We're a little bit in psychedelics. There are ways you can do it.
You can cheat your way across.
Of course. Well, you get little trips out, so to speak. But that's kind of like the thing we have in incarnation. And I think that's there for a reason, these boundary conditions. And just like I can't tell my dog, I can't explain to the dog like what my octave of consciousness is like compared to theirs, but we're obviously clearly both alive.
Yeah.
And just like music, you know, it's infinite, by the way, in both directions. We just can't hear it. Just sort of like the color spectrum or the light spectrum. Why wouldn't consciousness be the same way?
Yeah, of course. I think we probably actually underestimate what the consciousness of an animal feels like, because we have the sacred gift of the ego, which is the one that can deny our connection to God. The animals that don't have that are constantly in communion and union with the great mystery, you know, like with that force. And I say that because in an ayahuasca journey, I transformed into a triceratops, which was oddly enough,
that's pretty badass.
As a strange thing. And you think of a triceratops, you think of the big plate on the head, you think of that. No, that wasn't what was interesting about it. What was interesting about it is this low-level anxiety of loneliness and separation, which I've felt somewhere around my heart, except for moments where I can actually collapse into like real states of love with another person or with nature or with whatever. All of that was just blasted open, and my heart was as connected to the center of the earth, to the center of all centers, as I'd ever felt. Meanwhile, I felt like I had hooves and I had horns and I had a plate on my head, but none of that fucking mattered. What mattered is that I was connected to God, truly, without any doubt or without any separation. And I think, so we have this kind of hierarchy of mind, like, oh yeah, we're way smarter than our dogs, for sure. They're our pets, they're our little slaves. But like, really? They may be at a higher octave, and all animals might be operating in some ways at a higher octave than most of us are able to attain because of our ability to separate ourselves.
Maybe. I mean, I know it goes both ways probably. Just as I can't describe to the dog what my consciousness is like, I also can't understand theirs fully. So it's presumptuous for me to think, like, what's the consciousness of a tree?
Yeah, well, then consciousness may not even be the right word, even, right?
Well, what does that even mean anyway? No one really knows.
There's union, and then there's consciousness, and then, like, which one is... I think union, they got us beat. Consciousness, if we're talking about pure size, well, you know, we may have a... Well, I don't know. Like, what are we talking about here?
My friend had a dog that was dying, and they went to a dog psychic. Have you ever seen the dog... There's this show on YouTube about a woman who basically can communicate with animals. Anyway, check it out. It's quite interesting. But they went to one of these people, and let's just assume that it's legit or whatever. And the dog's dying, and so she communicates with the dog. Just kind of vibes with it for a while, and they said, "Well, can you just ask the dog like what it needs? What does it need?" And the dog's response was, "Well, I'd like some more, like, you know, those belly rubs are good, and some more treats would be good." And, you know, just, it's like the things dogs like.
Yeah.
And they're just like, oh, it's like, we're the ones who have all these hang-ups about dying. It's just kind of like, I'm dying, and yeah, pain sucks, but I'd like some more treats.
Yeah, treats,
you know, like,
treats would be awesome.
Yeah,
right now.
some more of that thing you do behind my ear. I'll take some more of that. Like, same old stuff.
Yeah.
So we go on our own trips about all these things, and that's our path. That's our karma.
Yeah, the simplicity. You know, I guess that's the story of the Garden of Eden, right? Being cast out of the Garden of Eden is in some ways could be the metaphor from the transition of the animalistic state where we're connected and one with God to the state where we become self-aware, and we're then like, oh shit, I'm a human, and the ego goes, I'm the center of the universe, you know? And then that moment, the knowledge of good and evil, you know, that's what they call it, the knowledge of good and evil, the knowledge of, that's where it all starts. And I think that's where the metaphor is. Now, the interpretation of that has obviously gone all kinds of different directions, but yeah, to me, that's where the metaphor makes sense. And I think we're on our own journey back. It's our own hero's journey back home with our mind intact, with our ego. We're not going to ever be able to shed that. But like Ram Dass, like with all of these things, but find the place where our heart is back home with source, you know, and that's, I think, the noblest goal that we could ever have. It's more important than Super Bowls, and
I think it's inevitable too. I think there's only one game in town, one show in town, as Ram Dass would say, and once you kind of figure out what that is, actually you're in that show, in that game, whether you know it or not. I think we're all hungry to return with God. We're just and when I say return, we're not separate, but it's sort of like we're hungry to just be unionized again with that which the fullness of what we are. I don't know about you, but look, I can say all this stuff, but it's hard for me.
Of course.
And I've had a serious struggles in my life with like depression and my mind, and I've had to find this out the hard way. And if someone said to me like, will you come back? Can you do this again? I think I would say no. I mean, I do find this to be really beautiful. I mean, I can't think of anything more beautiful, to be honest. But there's so much heartache that I'm not sure I would want to do it again. Yeah. Would you?
That's an interesting fucking question, man. I mean, I think there's moments that you feel where you know it was all worth it.
I know it's worth it.
But you know, right? but I agree, like the general condition that I've existed in, which has been a state of pretty ever-present anxiety and periods of fluctuating depression, and, you know, some great states and some ecstatic states, some ego champion states where I'm pounding my chest like fucking King Kong on the top of the Empire State Building. Like, I've had a variety, I've had a full gamut of experiences, but there's been some, you know, that I've said like, oh, I would always come back for this. And I've also known too that I probably wouldn't come back that often, but I would come back when I could be of the most service, right? Like that's what Iboga told. When I did Iboga the first time, it was like, yo, if you want to, I was like, bogus like crazy. It's like a Google search, like especially the first time I did it. It was like you could like Google, you could ask questions, like very specific questions. I was like, what's my soul like? What's it here for? And it was like, oh yeah, your soul likes to come in every 1,000 years when it feels like, it feels like it has some things that it could do. It has some good that it could do.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I get it. So like that's it. And maybe the soul pod, as Ram Dass says, like there's a soul pod up there, and we're up there.
For sure.
Like, and maybe, fuck, man, we just met each other, but maybe like we bump into each other and we're like, hey, man, we got to go back down there again. You're like, come on, man. I'm like, yo, it's time. And you're like, really? And I'm like, come on, bro.
I do think that's true. And look, right now, it's funny when you're speaking, I know like what I want to say to soothe like some of the pain you're having. And I feel myself saying that thing I was saying before of like, yeah, but I have pain. And then I go through the thing of like, oh, but it's okay to embody what I need and you need as a gift for both of us in a sense. And I think I totally resonate with that. I think actually the more you say it, I'm like, yeah, you're right. It's like, it's perfect. It's sacred and it's profane. It's horribly perfect.
Yeah.
Horribly perfect. If you were all that is, and that's all that there ever was, sort of out there, you're God, right? You are all that is, and there's nothing else. And you were going to separate anything out so that you could have an experience that is not all that is, or you know what I'm saying, to create opposites, or at least whatever this universe is that we're in. Why wouldn't it be the most epic, the most horribles, the most amazings? Yeah. It's exactly what it is.
Yeah, it is.
It couldn't be more crazy.
They designed the very best game possible.
And I'm like, of course it would be like that.
Yeah.
It would have every color, the humor and the sickness and the amazing beauty and the sexual stuff and the art and the wrestling with big questions and this unanswerable questions. Of course it would have them.
And the fight to save the earth.
Oh, dude, it couldn't be more epic.
It couldn't be more epic. And especially this time is like, it's absolutely the time of times. Doesn't mean it's always going to be easy. Doesn't mean it's always going to be fun. But yeah, when you have that perspective, you can recognize if this game is on the shelf at the fucking Universal Best Buy, it's fucking selling out. It's selling out every fucking moment. It's like the Popeyes chicken sandwich. Like people cannot get enough of this game.
It's intoxicating.
Yes,
but look, I think that what people struggle with and I struggle with is because of the information sickness we have, and we get to now see so much at once. There's so much, we're so connected globally, and there's so much information coming at us. The natural response is like, what do I do? What am I supposed to do? What do I do? And then that's love everybody, tell the truth. If you don't worry about the other stuff.
Yeah,
trust that if you can just do that stuff, the rest will unfold as it needs to unfold. The show will go on around you and in front of you. The sea will be the sea. There will be storms, but you are holding on to the steering wheel of that ship. You just need to choose where you want to go. And that's the power of choice. That's like, none of this bullshit about like, oh, I create my reality. It's like, well, you do choose where you want to go, but then there's also things are going to reverberate back, like throwing a pebble into a lake and it creates the ripples and then it hits things and they ripple back. And that's important though, that we do choose what we want to do and where we want to go. And maybe that choice sometimes is as simple as just telling the truth and loving everyone. It's like you could chew on that for a lifetime.
People don't realize that telling the truth and loving everyone is the same thing. It's a secret.
Oh, I like that.
Like he separated those two because we separate those two, but really there's no way you're in love with someone in true respect and without the condescension of judging, of like coddling their ego. Like if you really see them as a soul, the only way that you can love them is to tell the truth.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it is the same thing.
It's the same thing. And we get that twisted all the time. And I understand there's pragmatic applications for not telling the truth and whatever. Like I get, you could come up with some hypothetical that would make 100 people are going to die and all you have to do is lie. Like, oh, fine.
It's poetry.
But yeah,
it's all
exactly.
just poetry about
Exactly.
again, the mystery has no edge. It's like, don't take it so literally.
Right. But truth is always love. And like I've found that over and over and over again in all these relationships. Most of the time when we're afraid of the truth, we're afraid of the immediate consequence, but we're paying a much greater price down the road, even when someone's dying, right? Like if you're talking to the soul and you're expressing the truth and you're like, no, you're going to be okay and blah, blah, blah. Is that the most loving thing for the soul, or is that just that moment of coddling the ego? Like if you expand the perspective back to the unborn and the undying, it's always truth and love riding together. Like
it's scary sometimes. I know for myself, I had to learn what it even meant to tell the truth. And we can do things that really compartmentalize in our minds, where you think, or all this rationalization. And that happened for me on a personal level.
Of course.
And,
we hide the truth from ourselves all the fucking time, and we rationalize and justify. And I'm so slippery. I'm so slippery. I'm like trying to hold on to like one of those fucking like slippery eels, or one of those things that look like a giant sphincter that was, you remember those things that you could squeeze it and it was like made of water and it would like squirt out of your hand? Yeah. Like that's like me trying to hold on to myself, because I'll rationalize and justify, and I'm really good at creating these logical constructs and scaffolds that will appear out of nowhere, and people will look like, wow, well, I guess that makes sense. And that's why you did that thing. And I'm like, that's right. That's why I did that thing. And meanwhile, I'm just fucking bullshitting myself and everybody.
Well, I think that's why practice, or things like psychedelic experiences, whatever you can do to get perspective.
Yep.
Some people, for myself, it could be also like getting into nature. I mean, whatever it is you do to essentially clear your head and be able to step back from kind of the movie show of your own life that's going on right here in front of your face. You just need to step back at times and be like, okay, hold on a second. And I also think that was built into things like having a Sabbath and so forth. It just has gotten lost. But we've understood that. And these are, the faster our lives go now, we've maybe lost that bit of technology of rest and reflection.
No doubt.
And so what do you do, for instance, to get it? I'm assuming like exercise probably does it. Things like priming your body does it.
Some of these things can. I mean, really. So the transformational practice, ecstatic dance one, where I'm just link my body to music.
That makes sense.
Close out thoughts, and it's just movement and music, and then collapse that, and then I can get in visionary states. Shamanic breathing, where I can get there. Combining the breath and the cold can sometimes get me there, although that's more of a physiological response, but it's really nice.
Gives you perspective.
Gives me some perspective. It's Sweat Lodge,
Yes, I'm a big sauna guy for sure.
Like that's another huge one for me. And then the psychedelic experience, like that, in whichever way that is. There's the big ones like ayahuasca, obviously. There's the big dieta and preparation, and then there's the ceremony or set of ceremonies, and then there's the integration period, and really paying attention to both sides of that is also like super crucial. I haven't done one of those in a minute, but in the meantime, then it's little psilocybin journeys out in my ranch in Sedona, or a DMT experience, and I'm pretty comfortable doing those alone now.
Have you ever sat with psilocybin, with mushrooms, in a ceremonial type way?
That's the very first thing I did. That's what broke me open. So I was a shaman out in the mountains of New Mexico, and she gave me a psilocybin tea, and I felt my body completely evaporate. And I was like an angry atheist at that point, but I was curious.
Most are.
Yeah. And I felt my body evaporate, and I was like, fuck. I got some figuring outs to do.
Yeah.
And I just stayed up all night in this rainstorm, and as the wolves were howling, and it was just this wild night where I was just writing feverishly by the fire, just completely reevaluating the whole paradigm of everything that I had thought before because of what I'd felt and experienced.
The reason I released that sister record this year called Music for Mushrooms, a soundtrack for a psychedelic practitioner, and it's a 5-hour record that's designed to take you through that journey, because there isn't a lot of tools out there, modern tools, especially for mushrooms, because the music actually becomes the space.
No doubt.
So it's a very, very powerful influence on the experience. And I had 10 years of working with people and kind of that's actually where my music came from, literally. I was 10 years ago figuring out, how do I play for people in that space by myself? Well, I'm going to loop. It's going to be slow. It's going to grow. I brought in the nature field recordings, and doing some research about sound healing, both ancient and new. What are they doing in indigenous ceremonies with sound? Okay, I'm going to bring some of those techniques in, and let's just kind of put something together like a protocol that will work for our modern day Western ears and minds and hearts, and then test it out and just do it many times and see, oh, this works, this doesn't, add this, take this out. And instead of sitting on that in the private shadows, it's like this needs to be out there for people to use. And that's why I put it out. But as timing would have it, I think I told you this when we were chatting on the phone, that of course Michael Pollan's book came out, and the Denver and Oakland initiatives happened with the decriminalization of psilocybin, all coincidentally, so to speak, at the same time. But there's an emergence of this. And Ram Dass, going back to Ram Dass, he's arguably our psychedelic grandfather.
Right.
And he's been pushing this stuff since the 60s. And there's a song on the record about psilocybin. I had to ask him about it. And the first thing he said, going back to his sense of humor.
Psilocybin is my friend.
Exactly. Psilocybin is my friend.
Yeah.
And he talks about his first trip, where it was the first time he actually felt home for the first time ever in his life.
Yeah.
When essentially things were being shed away. And underneath that, again, your next breath, it's there already, and it's you.
Yeah, he talks about sitting on the couch and looking down to where his body was.
Like you were saying,
it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Like look down to where his body was supposed to be, and his body wasn't there anymore. And he goes,
like, okay,
okay,
this is gonna be real.
Yeah, exactly. Like that thing. It's hard to duplicate that thing in another way. You know what I mean?
And for a lot of people, that moment can go two ways. You can all of a sudden things start to drift away like your mind, and you can feel like you're dying, and things can go into the beautiful, let's just say transcendent, or can go into the darkness and panic and a quote unquote bad trip.
Right.
And again, out of compassion, that's why I really wanted this music out there, because I've had some experiences where I was making deals with God to get out of them. Really, I mean, really, really traumatic experiences with psilocybin. But I've also had many like really beautiful, important, transcendent ones. And I don't think one is like only have this versus the other. I think they're all very important and powerful. But I saw sort of mistakes I made in the technique of me going into that space that could have been corrected and changed, that probably would have avoided that perhaps.
Sure.
And again, music, people underestimate what role it plays as the central guide. Really, really powerful. It's not just like an influence. It's also like, you know, when it's coming out of speakers or even little headphones, it's still pressure waves. It's like a physical thing. And we underestimate the role of sound and music in our world and in our lives. And it's more pervasive now than it's ever been in the history of humanity. Ever.
Yeah.
And growing.
Yeah, and some reinforce that kind of egoic story of the world, and then some are songs for medicine. You know, so
it's a tool.
It's
a hammer. You can hit you over the head or build a house. I mean, it's what do you want to do?
Yeah, it's going to condition you one way or the other, whether we're aware of it or not. It'll condition the bad patterning of the relationships. I mean, I even like country music. I think country music's great, but I'll catch some songs and I'll be like, you really shouldn't say that. You know, it's the song about some guy shining his headlights in his ex-girlfriend's house and like showing up drunk and like don't sing that.
Young souls.
Don't sing that song. It's like, it's not what we need to be singing about. But yeah, and then there's the other ones. Whenever I do a DMT experience, I have Icaros that have been recorded by some of the best shamans that I've worked with. And I have now my Icaro playlist. And it's really like cannot be underestimated. And these are for ayahuasca, which the active ingredient, for those of you who don't know, is DMT. Mm-hmm. So the psychedelic experience you're having is an extended form of a DMT journey. It obviously has its own flavor to a certain extent. But the Icaros work with a DMT experience in the same manner, and that they call in different medicine, and fuck, it changes the game.
The shamans say that the Icaros they are the main piece of the ceremony. Mm-hmm. They're on the same wavelength about that being the song, and those songs are singing forth the spirit and guiding it. That is it.
That's it.
That tradition is embedded into the ayahuasca ceremony, and to this day, what's interesting about ayahuasca is that it's almost never divorced from the ceremonial setting. You don't hear people partying with ayahuasca or doing even really by themselves. It's almost always in a ceremony.
Oh, terrify's
You don't hear about it much, right?
Yeah. I'm just going to drink a couple cups.
I saw Hamilton Morris do it on Vice once. I was like, this guy's out there. But psilocybin is the opposite.
Right.
It typically, most people have not sat in ceremony with it, have not sat even like and given it space to really speak to them. They've been active, recreational, and they might have stumbled into really powerful, positive experiences, many people. But yet, it certainly didn't have a music tradition that carried with it.
Yeah.
And I said, we need to create one. We need a new American shamanic tradition for this, for now, because this is a really critical time.
No doubt. And I love, I haven't experienced it on the medicine, but I listened to some of it. It's like 5 hours, right?
It's 5 hours.
5 hours,
Clock's in it on the
so
dot.
I listened to a couple hours, and I love how you start with the traditional rattles, which is kind of like rattling.
And train the brain.
And yeah, you're like, oh.
A nod to every ceremony for all time.
Exactly. And then whether it's the chakapas, which is what they use in that's their version of the rattle, which is these dried leaves that they use to shake in the ayahuasca ceremony, or it's the rattles in different traditions, but it starts and you're like, okay, we're in the medicine land now.
It's very patient, and I can't wait for you to like.
I know, man. I can't wait.
I'm kind of eager because I'm like, I can't wait for that conversation after.
Yeah, totally, man, totally.
I remember when I had that with Beretta, and it's like I sent him a couple people. I sent him like pre-mixes, like if you're interested in testing this, I'd like some feedback, like, not just trying to do a little more research.
Yeah,
and. The first person I sent it to is just a friend of mine, and I get this voicemail at like 2 a.m. This is the voicemail. It's just like, dude, holy shit. Oh my God, dude. Oh, amazing. Oh, track 11. Oh my God. Hangs up. It's like, all right, cool. That's
good.
One check. Research continues. Yes.
Yeah, that's fucking badass. So sometimes, and I don't think Parangi will mind me sharing this, but I've had the fortune. I mean, he's an amazing musician, as you know. You had him on your podcast, and
I got to see him play down at my spot in Boulder, Utah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So in a lot of the ceremonies we've done, when we do like ceremonial psilocybin, we'll have him kind of lead the musicality of that.
Yeah.
And play drums and do different things, and there was one particular ceremony, and in this ceremony, we took the penis envy strain, and for whatever reason, it wasn't so much that we pushed the boundaries of how much we took, but whatever collective reason, it was all men on like a full moon night.
Oh boy.
And for whatever, and there's like a bunch of masculine, like, and for whatever reason, the energy just ramped as like high as, and went into like immediate ramp up to chaos to the point where like everybody was at the screaming maximum of their dose, and this wasn't through any like recklessness. And Parangi is like one of the best medicine men I've seen in space in ceremony without. And I remember at one point, it's just chaos. At one point, he looks at his instrument and he goes, "Oh wow." And just puts it down. And I was like, all right, the fucking wheels are off now. We're trusting in something much more divine. And there was no music. It was just like this crazy orchestration of laughter and sound. And then some people outside, inside. Finally, 5 hours later, we were able to come back together and like play music together. Because we started drumming in, like we drummed in to try to create resonance, but then it just got and that's the thing that with mushrooms that can happen. It's a dose thing, and it's also an energetic thing.
Yeah,
like some things sometimes it just fucking ramps.
Well, you're calling in spirit and energy, and you're not in control of that spirit, but I think people underestimate how you need to hold that space. You really need someone, I think, steering that ship, because you're opening up, in a sense, cracks into other. How do I put this in without freaking people out? You just got to be careful what you're inviting in unintentionally, and you need a strong sense of that happening and really defining your space. And so I think people don't realize what can happen in that way. And I've been doing a concert series publicly that's just called East Forest Ceremony, and it's really merging essentially these elements of ceremony with just elements of straight up concert. But the idea being, how can we use this technology of ceremony, which is very simple, again, but very powerful, any way we want in our daily lives, and without any medicine besides just your own consciousness and your breath? And where can we go with this stuff? Because I don't want people to think that psychedelics are a panacea, or that they're for everyone.
Because they're not.
And they're not. And they're not everyone. We're not going to have everybody doing that. And it's not going to be for everybody. But it doesn't mean that we don't all have access through different doorways into those spaces and into what those spaces are engendering. And so doing this kind of concert series, it's like anyone can walk into it. And there's not even any kind of language that's like, well, that's not my club. Or you talked about dolphins, so, I'm out. It's like, you're just saying things like, what do you notice right now? Sit with that in this next song. Is something coming up? Write it down. What wants to speak to you in this, that kind of stuff. And the music itself, I think, is doing the main work, which has no words. It's just something universal, as we said at the beginning, about when you hear that, you respond to it in the same way as I respond to it, the same way someone else responds to it. It has a universal message. And that's what's so cool about music, is that it engenders emotion and feeling and can take us places.
Yeah.
You don't have to understand it.
And we are constantly singing our own song. And that's another thing too. Like music does that universally. And it has its own vibration, but we have a vibration and we're emitting our own song that's other people are listening to. And that's, I think, going back to the power of being. Like we have to realize that we're broadcasting our own music.
You're making me think, Aubrey.
Yeah. So like when you're there, I'm imagining when you're there with Ram Dass, like he's broadcasting a song of who he is, the song of everything.
Love. Yeah. He's
and it's
just
love.
pouring love
and
all the time.
It is the greatest, probably the greatest love song. And that's the same that he talks about his guru, Maharaji. Like he was singing the greatest love song without saying a word. And then we have that opportunity to sing that. So perhaps some of us need to do all the ayahuasca, and like me, all the ibogas and all the psilocybins and all the things. Maybe one day, and I'm sure I have in certain instances, I've been able to sing a song without any words that people have been like, wow.
I think you do it all the time. Yeah.
Thanks, bro.
And it's in between the words.
Yeah.
I really do. I think something I often say a lot is that we're singing one another awake.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is kind of what you're saying. If you're singing your own song, it fits in perfectly with that thought of mine, that we're in this tapestry, this great artwork that is all existence, and we're each the perfect paintbrush stroke that needs to be on that to create, but you can't see it unless you really step back to see the whole picture. But like your color of red and the way it curves is unique to you. And my little stroke of blue up here is unique to me. And they both need to be there. They're both drops in the ocean to create the whole ocean. But the ocean is dynamic and moving and alive.
Yeah.
And it's something that is growing all the time and dying all the time. So I think that's helpful for people to really feel that.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of like you're important.
Always.
And your choices, they matter.
Always.
And there's nothing to do.
Yeah. Love everyone, tell the truth.
Yeah.
Which is love everyone.
Yeah.
Can be, which is then just love, be love. And be loving awareness.
Ram Dass, in that song about meeting Maharaji, what essentially he's saying is that if Bhagwan Das. He took him to meet Maharaji the first time, way back when, and he says, I'm going to go see my guru. Do you want to go? And Ram Dass was skeptical of all this stuff. He's like, I don't believe in gurus, but sure, I have nothing to do, so let's go. So they drove up, and they get there, and they go up the long path up the mountains, and he says he goes up, and he sees an old man with a blanket wrapped around his shoulders, and 20 or so people all dressed in white sitting around him. And he says, this is a cult. I'm a Harvard professor. I know what this is. These people have given over their power, lost their minds. I'm not going any further. Well, the night before they got there, because it took a couple of days to get there, they stopped at someone's house just to stay. And while Ram Dass was at the house, he went out to go to the bathroom. He's taking a leak outside, and he's looking at the stars, probably high elevation. Had one of those moments of the infinite feeling and like, wow. He started thinking about his mother who had just died. She died of her spleen. I was just thinking about it. It was connected. Like, wow, she's a soul and all that kind of stuff. It's a real important moment. He didn't tell anybody about it. Well, anyway, he's standing there thinking about the cult folks, looking at the old man, judging. The old man looks at him. He's in the distance, and he has an interpreter, Maharaji. He says, you were thinking about your mother last night. And he's just like, what? I mean, this is the kind of games he plays. Like,
Yeah.
I know what you need right now. I need to blow your mind up. And then he said she died of her spleen, and he just read his mind, right? And he's like, this guy knows everything about me. And then he thought, he knows all the shitty stuff in my head too. I mean, he knows everything. And now I'm completely embarrassed. I'm like, I don't want you knowing everything about me. But what he was getting from Maharaji was unconditional love. He said, this man was loving me. Not just loving me, but he was loving me in a way I'd never been loved unconditionally before. And he knows everything about me. And he said, all of a sudden, because he witnessed that and gave it to me, I loved everyone. Now, I had never done that. And then the next level, he says, including myself. And from then on, as he says in the song, it was just love, 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 love. And here he is today, like 50 years later. And that's a really important thing.
Yeah.
It goes back to that witness.
Yeah, you heard the song that Maharaji was
Maharaji's song.
Maharaji's song. And then that reminded, and there's another saying that Paul Selig, one of my other spiritual teachers, he says is that we sing each other's song so that we remember the words. Like that was the same song. That was Ram Dass's song too, because all of our songs are a love song, our own version of that same love song. And so by hearing the words of by hearing Maharaji's song, it awoken, that same song in Ram Dass, who then was like, oh, that's my song too. And then he was able to sing that song. And I'm sure he wavered at that point because it was early on the path. I'm sure he wavered in and out like we all do. But
of course.
He felt what it was like to sing that song. And I think, for those of us who haven't had a guru experience, I think the plants have been my guru, for more than anything. And I've had some great teachers and people I've learned from. And I've had a few experiences that were close where I felt something like, when Don Miguel Ruiz gave me like a hug every morning when I went to go see him, it felt like something a lot different. It felt like that love that holds no record of wrong, that presence which knows no past or future. Like I got a sense of that. And for me, that was probably the closest I've been. But
there's a song called You're a Guru on the record. And it's him talking about Maharaji, but in the background, he's saying the whole time, you're a guru. And it's a strange thing about he's the guru, but I'm a guru. But that's kind of the point. It's like, especially these days, I don't think anyone needs a guru.
Yeah.
It's especially, again, with the democratization of information. We have all these experiences and answers at our fingertips. It's really just, again, about choice. And the idea of loving people, I mean, what would it feel like? Just people you don't know. Why can't you just give the gift to the cashier at the grocery store as they're handing the receipt to just love them for a second? It's not going to be a weird moment. They might. They're going to know deep down that it's happening. I was saying, like, why not? And what if that's the way we heal ourselves into a brighter future, is in these micro moments? Because by doing that to them, you're going to start planting those seeds in yourself about loving yourself, forgiving yourself. And you're going to be, all of that is about the present moment as well, too. It's not about your mind thinking about the past and the future. And so, again, the prescription is quite simple.
Yeah.
And it's not something that I need to teach you.
Yeah. You
know how to love just as good as I do. And we can trust people to do that, and how they feel it feels right.
And loving and finding that love in yourself. I mean, if I think about the moments where I have expressed that love, it comes so much easier when you have it, and it becomes actually possible maybe even when you have that love and you're holding that love for yourself. Like I can think of those moments that happen every once in a while with a stranger where I'm able to just go up to a stranger and give them a compliment, and I'll like feel them like light up and like come alive, or like feel these moments. And it's always the moments where I naturally feel the best, and I feel the most internal, like self-contained love. And then at that point, it's the obvious thing to do. It's the obvious thing to do, to just show that love and then let somebody else in on the song that's playing for myself. And so finding the ways that, we can love ourselves without judgment, without comparison, without trying to live by the prescriptions and rules of what makes us worthy of love that conditioned into us by our society, and the things that our parents said, and the reasons that our father or our mother loved us. Maybe if we scored more points or got more A's, then we got more love. All
There's
this
always
bullshit.
regrets or things that wronged you.
Right.
Or, always.
Always.
The second song on the record is my favorite song. It's called Dark Thoughts. And I think this is an important point, though, because what do we do about that stuff? It's one thing to say I need to love everyone, but what about when I have my own dark thoughts, or I have depression, or I have the negativity, or I have that voice, or suicidal thoughts? And the natural response to that is some form of pushing it away or working. But Ram Dass's response was to love your dark thoughts. I was like, man, I never thought about that. Sort of like a small child, bring it closer and with patience. And it's like, you're having a tantrum, or you're really hurting. And I can watch that child and know it'll pass. It's not going to pass right now. And I can even cultivate that awareness in myself now. And I think that's actually what I'm working on, is the witness of my own show. And that's something Ram Dass talks about throughout the record. You hear him coming up from different angles about the witness and sitting in that soul consciousness that you can see your life. And so maybe I'm seeing the dark thoughts happen and I love the dark thoughts. Or I am the loving awareness as a way of getting out of my mind. These are all different ways of cultivating that seed of consciousness. And that is something that is a practice. But I think the more you do that, the more that becomes perhaps where you spend a lot of your time.
Yeah, it's like these cycles, like these circles that are kind of going towards that higher level of awareness that we're looking for, and the greater level of ever-present love, presence and love, and all of the things that we're looking for. But we're in these cycles where we'll still dip down into the blindness, into the egoic rage, or all these other things. But it's just a cycle. And if we judge ourselves, we stay longer down in the downside. But if we love those moments, we'll love ourselves back up to the upswing of love. What
if, Aubrey, that is the engine of everything? It's like, not that we're always wanting to remember, but in order to remember, which is this positive thing we talk about a lot, you need to forget. Therefore, like from sort of an Eastern perspective, that yin yang, the forgetting is just as important. The falling away is just as critical. It's not something for us to transcend. That's something that's been really tripping me out for the past few months. It's like,
that's blowing my mind too.
How can I honor the forgetting? So if I'm in that witness where I see it happening, but I don't identify with it, it's like, that's going to happen. I'm going to have bad days. I'm going to have good days. It's very Buddhist. It's like, they're all going to change. It's just this flow. It's just this thing happening. It's this wheel turning that is sort of this incarnation that I'm in. How much can I watch that and love the process and not identify with that process happening moment to moment? It's going to happen. And sort of the grace and gratitude I can feel to forget. That's hard. But that feels like this sort of an edge that I'm on personally right now.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it like the engine of this whole growth, because we're here to learn, right? So, and we're here to grow. And if that's the engine of growth, then it helps you even love it even more. Which is like, because it puts it in a framework. Nothing. Without it, because it's necessary, and it's ubiquitous. It's not our fault. It's not like you tripped up and I fucked up and I forgot to be the witness and I did this thing. And so there's some form of blame and some form of judgment, which is not love, which holds no record of wrong. It's the other thing. And then so you have to work through that. But what if you're just holding the space of, this is the engine. It's the remembering and forgetting engine. And here I am in the forgetting. And then I love that. And I'll be back in the remembering and I'll love that. And that's a whole other way to look at it.
I think that's what meditation is really cultivating, probably, is your ability to see. That's what mindfulness is, the ability to see that and not identify with it. So, and that's what psychedelics can do in such a profound, fast way, is they shoot you out into this mega perspective on things. But how do we then, we don't want to just always be coming down, all right? So it's like I'm always going away and then coming down, and Ram Dass would talk about that too. He's like, I was always getting high, but then I had to come down. And eventually I was like, what am I running from?
He was blaming it on external things. That's what that Becoming Nobody documentary definitely talks a lot about. Is like, he's like, well, the cities bring me down. So he's pushing himself farther and farther up onto a mountaintop somewhere.
Right.
When he was like, no, that's not the way. The
And I don't know if there's an out anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And my girlfriend Rada we were talking about this the other day. I don't know why it struck me so hard, but she said the phrase like, there's no out. And I said, yeah, there's no out. But then all of a sudden I really felt that, what if there's no out? Like you kill yourself, you're just back into another form of consciousness. You're like, what the fuck did I just do? Like, there's nowhere to go. There's no out.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you then, like the same phrase, there's only one show in town. Why wouldn't you get on with the show and the program? It doesn't matter. There's no judgment. You can take all the time you want. Everybody graduates. You really can. But it's just saying, but you might as well.
Yeah.
Because there's no escape anymore. And we feel that on a very surface level, like with people, some people are like, I'm not going to have a smartphone. And it gets harder and harder to unplug in a sense. And it's getting to a point, like there really isn't any more a cave where you can really just be in your own bubble, realistically, So now I think it's about how can, with all these different things and experiences and supplements and psychedelic experiences and pieces of art and information, all the things we're learning and talking about, I would hope that the proof of the pudding is that you walk through your life with more grace and love, that you're just more at peace with the journey. And not that maybe the journey is now all smoothness or anything. It's just that your ability to surf those waves is just, you're a better surfer.
Yeah.
There's more grace that you bring to it.
There's no doubt about that. I mean, of all the things, it hasn't been that the waves have stopped. And in some ways, to continue continue training you to be a better surfer, you kind of need bigger waves and gnarlier reefs to a certain degree.
You need some storms there.
Yeah,
huh?
you need some storms. And I think I've sought out some of those storms. My whole open relationship journey, all these different things have brought, typhoon level storms.
Is that a past tense? I don't know much about your personal life.
Yeah, I separated from Whitney recently. And so, I mean, it's its own journey now. Now it's its own thing. We have our own, form of relationship that we're exploring now, which is the no relationship.
What the hell does that mean?
Well,
no relationship.
Well, people are in, like imagine if you couldn't speak and you were around people. There would be affinities. You would nuzzle up against some people. You would laugh. You would share food with some. But the expectations of using the words, which ultimately can create a certain prison of expectation and a certain thing to live up to and go towards. Like you would still probably have some feelings if you really wanted to nuzzle, and then the person you wanted to nuzzle from was nuzzling from somebody else. You'd be like, oh man, I wanted that nuzzle, or I wanted that bite of fucking berry that I wish they would have given it to me. It's not like you're absolved from feelings. The feelings
jealousy.
Are there. Yeah, there's some of these things that are going to be there. But if you're in there and you're in this group and you actually have love and you don't have the expectations of a framework,
like a closed group.
Well, no, now it's nothing. Like there's no relationship framework, which I think is something that's very fucking interesting, because open relationship, it has a lot of expanded boundaries. So like we're free to see other people sexually, to explore other people emotionally, but we were always trying to maintain this kind of proof of love for each other. And always.
Why do you need to prove it?
Well, we were fucked up, man. I don't know.
No, you're not. No, you're not.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, I think that was the inherent tendency that we had, because somehow we doubted that we were worthy of love. We needed the other person to choose us the most. We needed to be special. We needed all of these things to feel worthy of love ourselves. So we chose this open relationship construct to break us, ultimately, of the delusion and the fallacy that anything external is what makes us worthy of love. So yeah, you're right. But like in the delusion, caught in the delusion of the thing, there was things that made us feel worthy of love and made us feel like the relationship was strong or weak or all of these different things.
But do you think that would be inherent though in any form of relationship? I mean, why by getting into how'd you put it, a non-relationship relationship or?
Yeah, it's the no relationship.
Wouldn't you still have those relationships with other people about being worthy of love and going through the same things in different forms?
I think,
not to simplify.
Yeah, I think the open relationship definitely broke some of these patterns, the patterns of needing validation. Like people ask me, like,
you face those. Yeah.
People ask me, like, oh, you just wanted to have sex with other people? when you wanted to be in an open relationship, I was like, no. I needed to have sex with other people because I needed to have sex with other people to love myself. Because if I didn't get that validation from other people, I wasn't able to love myself. This was an addiction. This was something I need. Not like I was addicted to sex, but I was addicted to the validation that came from somebody else's interest. And as soon as I would soaked up one person's interest in me, I needed it from someone else. It's just like a person who buys one Bentley needs another Rolls Royce, needs another car. They need the validation of those external wealth things.
Well, I'm on my 7th Bentley, so I get it, dude. Yeah.
So like I needed it at that point, and the open relationship broke me of those needs. And now in the situation that I'm in, it's not that I wouldn't say I'm never going to get in a relationship again, but I think it's interesting to have a no relationship where there's no expectations, there's nothing that needs to be upheld, there's no way that she can or anybody can transgress upon the rules that we have set, because all relationships have agreements and boundaries, and those agreements have expectations, the expectation that they're going to be met. And every time you have an expectation, you have the fear of it not being met, so you have a state of anxiety, and then you either have it met, but then when it's met, it's just an expectation, so you don't really enjoy it. And then when it's not met, you have the deep suffering that comes from it being not met. So you're kind of putting yourself in this fucked position where as soon as you have an expectation, you're either anxious that it's not going to happen. If it does happen, you expected it, so you robbed yourself of the joy. And if it doesn't happen, you usually internalize that as some failure of yourself, and then you love yourself less. So like, what if you just removed all fucking expectations?
How's that going?
Great.
It's going good?
So far. I mean, I'm not going to say, I'm not such a fool that I will say that this is something. It's been fucking what, 3 months? I don't know. It's been like almost no time.
A season, yeah.
Oh yeah, it's been a small season, and it's been the happiest season I've had in I don't know, my entire life probably. Mm-hmm. I mean, not that I haven't had a few moments where shit got squirrely, not necessarily relationship wise, just internally, but I can clearly say this has been the happiest I've been, and it's an interesting experiment.
Do you lose, though, a sense of a deepening of an intimacy?
It depends on whether we were already losing that sense of a deepening of intimacy by our own protection mechanisms from the pain that we were continually causing ourselves from failing to meet the expectations. So the construct that we were in was already dissipating the intimacy that we should have been cultivating. So I'm not like a proponent. Like people think like, Aubrey Marcus, he's an open relationship proponent. It fits the two of you
at this moment in time. You're saying very well. It's a good prescription for what you're each going through.
It's definitely allowing us to heal a lot of the things that were hurting us, which is the failure to meet certain levels of expectations. So that when we come, imagine us wordlessly, we can just come and kind of nuzzle into each other. And when we nuzzle, there's no fear and there's no like, don't nuzzle me this close, because if you nuzzle me this close, then I'm gonna have these. We're just like, aw. That feels really fucking good. Like you would with like a really close friend or like so without the fear, we're actually able to express love. But I can imagine and hypothesize other forms of relationship that are beyond fear and beyond anxiety and beyond the entrapments of expectation. So I'm not saying that like this is the way and like hallelujah, I've found the way. It's the no relationship. I'm just saying that
the no relationship.
For now,
I love that idea.
For now though, it's just like we're like cave people who can't speak, and we just nuzzle up when we want to nuzzle up, and then we nuzzle away and we walk away when we want to walk away.
You're just protozoa cells that I sense energy and
yeah, exactly.
Well, relationships are absolutely the crucible of spiritual work. I think the only thing bigger than that is children. And so I'm a part-time stepdad. It's PTSD, as I like to call it. And even that alone, I really see how much it gives me and challenges me. And then the next thing is relationships. So look, again, everybody graduates and you can go at any speed you want. And I don't think there's a right or wrong. That is something like what you're describing is certainly nuanced and sophisticated and complicated. And that's not a judgment. I'm just thinking like, wow, I love people who think outside the box. I think it's almost better to experiment and think about all the different variations. And then again, that power of choice. You may choose. It's like, no, I want to be in a monogamous sort of somewhat traditional relationship, but there's nothing worse than making choices without actually making them.
Yeah.
in any form of our lives. That's a pattern for something biting in the ass later on, for sure.
And so many of us do it. It's like
Most of our decisions.
We're just like downloading the document that says this is how you have a relationship and smashing ourselves.
That's what marriage is typically.
Yeah, smashing ourselves into the proscription of this kind of idea when really you should be creating your own.
Well, it takes a lot of self-awareness to know about yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't know if a lot of people do. They don't actually know what they want or how to do it.
Man, I thought I was 5 years ago I started. I'm 38 now, so I was 33 then. I thought I was fucking smart at 33.
Most
I didn't know
33-year-olds
shit.
do.
I didn't know shit about shit. Like I had no fucking clue until like we went through this process and it like broke me into different levels of awareness. I mean,
Yeah.
and these were not like light. This was not like a light tapping, you know, like of a Fabergé egg. This was sledgehammering of like deep, thick, encrusted concrete that had been built up through whatever means, but like. And that process is incredibly painful, but incredibly liberating when you actually start to break up these big pieces and can actually get them moving. And now feel myself liberated from some of these things. And so what the choice of the future is, who knows?
Yeah, these people often only change through quite large calamitous events, bankruptcy, near-death experiences, breakups, these sort of divorces. And that's often what we need. And so it kind of sounds like you courted that in some ways intentionally, as Charles Eisenstein would say too, when he sees someone, I've seen him say to people, if they're really depressed or they've done things like this, it's like, you're a brave soul. Congratulations. And I think that's very true. And you could say that's what we're going through as a planet. I hope we don't need to go bankrupt as a planet and have a near-death experience or these sorts of things, or the death of a parent or child, so to speak.
As long as it's
kind of happening.
As long as it's a near-death planet experience, and maybe that's the way it is, because these things I experienced, yes, they were horribly painful, and yes, there was a lot that I had to go through. But like you said, I needed them, and it wasn't like I was intentionally being heroic. Let's not get this twisted and say like, "Wow, what a brave guy!" I thought I was being clever, and subconsciously, I set the stage, you know. So I subconsciously probably was driving myself towards these, and I knew it would be somewhat challenging, but didn't have any idea how challenging it would be. But maybe the planet, like, you know, universally, we need to really experience some challenge, some like real. In order to really inspire people to move forward. Maybe that's what needs to break the armor down. And maybe it can be a smoother and more effortless
I pray for grace. I do,
pray for grace too.
But I don't have control. I also think that the soul sets up the lessons until you learn.
Yep.
Not as there's no like whipping there. It's just sort of like that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
And again, you can do it over and over and over and over again. It's okay.
Everybody graduates.
Everybody graduates. You know it.
Man, I fucking love this conversation.
Yeah,
Thanks so much for coming.
It's been an
out.
honor. You've been circling around my worlds for years, so it's always like I've gotten used to now to kind of going with the flow and saying, "Oh, here it is. Oh,
yeah.
There you are, soul again." So it's been cool to cross paths.
Yeah, no doubt, man. And then the album. Definitely want to talk about that. We've talked about it a bunch.
Yeah, it's out anywhere you listen to music, and there's a double vinyl, limited press, and CDs and that kind of stuff that's available on my site. It's the only place actually you can get the vinyl. I think Ram Dass's folks, I gave them some too. That's eastforest.org, not .com. That'll take you to a Chinese language site, and so .org, eastforest.org.
Dope.
Yeah, and there's videos and stuff coming out, and other like ancillary content to kind of round out, but the album is the foundation of it all. And again, it was just a way to spark conversations. Each one of the songs is a micro teaching, really. There's 14 songs, and they're there to inspire you. And it's like poetry. I said to him when we were wrapping up, I said, Ram Dass, it's just perfect poetry. You're perfect. And he laughed and said, perfect. And the mics were still on. And I took that, and that's one of the songs. It's just called Perfect. And it's Ram Dass laughing. Because that in itself encapsulated something, again, that didn't need a lot of words.
Yeah.
And the music is just there as inspiration and to encourage people to dive into what comes up for you, and let that be a doorway into more exploration. And I trust that process is bigger than me and bigger than Ram Dass, and it serves the purpose it will serve for each person in the moment they need it. And so thanks for helping get it out.
When the student is ready, the teaching appears. And that's certainly been the case for me in my experience with Ram Dass. I think when I was ready, to actually receive that in a way that I could, I was ready.
Yeah. He's the dude. And
he's the dude.
He's there was an article with him in the New York Times today about, I think it's something like Ram Dass is ready to die or something like that. And he is. And so these are some of the gifts. He's given us a lifetime of gifts. And some of the ones that are coming right now are really precious.
Yeah.
Because when I went over there a year ago to record him, I went back to play at the retreat he did in Maui in December. So what is that, like 6 months or longer or whatever? He wasn't really talking much anymore. He can't. And I realized that there was a real moment in time there. I don't think he could do it anymore.
Yeah.
And so that might have been some of the last things he has to say. What he gives now is much more through his presence, and it's beautiful and pure.
Yeah.
It really is. But this idea of like capturing words that he speaks, I didn't realize that at the time. But now looking back, even 1 year, I feel honored that I was able to do my part to just show up and be able to play the role I had to play, my little brushstroke, to allow him to spread that message to people who maybe haven't heard it before.
No doubt. And all the gratitude that everybody listening, myself being one of those people, gratitude to you. And then, of course, gratitude to Ram Dass for the work to be able to do it. But
Ram.
the whole synchronization was necessary to make that whole thing happen. So much love, man. Also on your site, eastforest.org, you got a bunch of cool smoking blends and oils and a bunch of cool shit you gave me here.
Yeah,
so let's fucking explore around.
Music and stuff.
Dip around
retreats,
in there.
podcasts, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Poke around a little bit. Take your time. Don't be in a hurry.
Yeah. More information. I'm just putting out more. That's what we need, Aubrey, is more content in this world.
No doubt. Well, much love, my man.
Thanks,
Great to
dude.
have you, brother.
Yeah.
See you, everybody. Peace.